This is a cinematic mode test on the Google Pixel 7, and I got the screen recorder going too, so I can kind of show you what it looks like if you have the camera. Everything is completely auto right here, but we're going to touch the stars and stripes, the flag, and all your exposure and white balance will show up. It disappears really quickly, but the little white autofocus dot remains. We're going to lock that with the video focus lock. That will bring down the exposure just a tad. But we're going to keep that lock box there because that'll control the point of the blur. So that'll remain in focus, hopefully, more predictably if the focus is locked. Also, when you move the camera like this, that focus lock will keep it at about 3 feet away, because that's where we're about 3 feet away. So you can see by the separation that there is a little bit of weirdness going on. These are sharp edges on this guy here, on this statue. But I mean, it's the first iteration. It's the first. We'll just go a little bit closer, and then we'll refocus on his head and lock it. But you can tell it's got a little bit of weirdness around the edges, and those are sharp edges. But that's to be expected with the first iteration. It's 24 frames per second, 1920 by 1080. But what's more interesting actually is if you take the camera and you pan it out into here and then you were to click it. So we'll do the focus and it'll go right on infinity and we'll lock it. It doesn't work as well out there because you need a subject that's within about, I'd say, 1 to 6 feet, 1 to 4 feet. Like this guy here. Relock on his face. The reason that you should just use subjects in the foreground is because it's easier for the software to focus on a subject that's closer to the camera and separated from the background. If the subject is too far away from the camera, the software is going to be confused. It won't know how to separate it. It also helps if your background's farther away from your subject. That makes it easier for the software to do its work too. But here's a better sort of alternative, I feel, to this cinematic mode. We're going to shut the camera off and we're going to switch to just a regular video mode. We're going to lock on this guy's face and we're going to pull the exposure down. That's actually not bad separation. Let's change it, and we'll change it, and we'll focus on his flag, the stars and stripes. That's actually not bad. There's some decent separation there. That's a 1/1.3 sensor on this camera. But if you had like a 1-inch sensor, which some cell phone cameras do, that would even be better. But it's nice and clean, this bokeh here. I mean, it's very clean. And if you had a better control of the focus, you could even cheat the focal plane, and you could say, I don't know, step up to him, lock focus, then pull back. He's still in focus because he's within the focal plane, but the background's even farther out of focus. But you need to really be watching what you're doing. But whatever the case, both of these techniques, using the cinematic mode or just using the regular video mode, you need to just do headshots. Headshots or waist-up shots within 3 to 4 feet of the camera. If you get any farther than that, it's just gets too crazy. Even if you're shooting a Hollywood movie with cinema cameras with APS-C sensors, you need fast lenses and you have to know what you're doing. But for this, for YouTubers, shooting people talking headshots, just get within 3 feet and use the Google Pixel 7 with this big sensor in here, this 1/1.3, and you can get some decent separation. And we are shooting at Camouflage Military Surplus. There's our guy. Here's our situation. So now if you wanted to do some vlogging here and you wanted to introduce some cinematic mode into that, that's a much harder thing to do because the cinematic mode is only on the back camera. But we'll try it. So we're in cinematic mode and we're going to just turn the camera around and point it at me because it's only cinematic mode in the back camera, and we're going to hope the cinematic mode grabs my face. We're going to hope that I'm in frame and the exposure is right. This is why you can't really use this technique because you need a screen to monitor everything. So I don't recommend that you use it this way. Okay, we're going to try cinematic mode shot again because the last shot was kind of loud right there. So we're just on the main lens. Cinematic mode is active. It's a long shot. Cinematic mode is only available in the back camera, so it kind of helps to have a subject in the foreground in order to see any kind of results. But the problem is that cinematic mode just kind of does what it does unless you touch on the screen, like on this post. And the closer that the objects are to the camera, the better. Like, let's say 1 to 4 feet is probably best. If you lock focus, that's also best. But I think the best implementation for this feature is for vloggers. So since it isn't available in the selfie camera, I'm just going to flip the phone around and show you what it looks like. So we're flipping the phone around. I'm just looking into the lens. It's about 2 feet away from me. The problem is you can't see the frame, you don't know the exposure, you don't know the focus, and you don't know what that blur is doing. So I think for the Pixel 8 they'll probably add the cinematic blur on the selfie camera, where it could be some use for vloggers. For sake of argument, we'll do the same shot with just the main camera to show you the natural bokeh you can achieve. Okay, it's the same shot. We're just shooting with the main camera, regular video mode, same 1920 by 1080, except it's P30 instead of P24. We'll just focus on that post. You don't get as much blur on that post because the post is only about 2 feet away, but it's more apparent when you use it for a vlogging situation, which I will show you. I'm just going to flip the camera around. So I'm just flipping it around. It's a 1/1.3 sensor. So when you're holding it about 2 feet away from you, maybe 3, it gives you some separation. But again, you can't see the bokeh. You can't see the framing, you can't see the exposure, you can't see the focus. It could be wandering off. It's hard to lock it. You could accidentally touch the screen. But you can see that there is a lot of potential for having a large sensor large sensor with a fast aperture just held close to your face for a vlogger is probably just as good or better than any kind of software bokeh or software blur. But I guess it just costs more money to put larger sensors into these cell phone cameras. But this idea, this concept of the big sensor, fast aperture, held close to you, especially for vloggers, it's a great idea. And we'll do one more test. And the only camera I have that does cinematic blur really well is my iPhone 14 Plus. I'll show you a shot of that and how they implement cinematic blur, and it works quite well. But they've been at it for quite a while, so it's more advanced. Okay, I've got the screen recorder on so that you can see the menu. You can see how the focus tracking is trying to focus on my face. And I'm going to push record. I'm also going to push on my face to lock it. You should always lock it because it's just a good idea to nail down that point of focus so you don't get any surprises in post. In post, you should be able to adjust the focus, but sometimes it's not as flexible as you once thought it was. So it's best to just focus lock on the thing that you think is the most important, so that in post you've got your main subject in focus. And I've got everything on auto, and you can adjust the blur on this. You can't adjust the blur on the Pixel 6, or Pixel 7, sorry. But on this you can adjust the blur. So the blur is set at f5.6, which is kind of a nice value. You can kind of see the separation. They've been at it for a while, but sometimes there's holes in the blur. The cinematic blur on the back camera tends to be more accurate than on the selfie camera. This is the selfie front-facing camera, but you can see your face, you can see your exposure, you can see everything. And this is genius for vloggers, especially if you want to vlog in public and move and do stuff. It's 4K P24. The problem is that with 4K P24 or 4K 30, there's some processing that has to be done, and the processing takes time, like when you try and download the files. So if you shoot 1980 by 1080 P30, it processes a lot faster. The Pixel 7 is 1980 by 1080 P24. It doesn't seem to have a second level of processing. It just, bang, the file gets processed immediately, and there's no hesitation when it comes to the download stage, which is nice. Maybe that tensor chip is doing its thing. It just needs to do it in the selfie mode, because this is what we need. We need this screen. So we're going to do a little bit of a walk and talk with it, because this is the absolute genius for, vloggers. Because then you can move, And the mics, I recommend setting the mics to stereo off. There's just less mics on that way. Picks up less noise with wind. Pixel 7 has a problem. It has 3 mics. All the mics are active all the time. So it picks up more wind noise. And Samsung phones, I hear, you can control the mics better. So its implementation of cinematic mode might be worth trying, because you can control the mics better. I've yet to do that, but I've got to buy a Samsung phone ASAP, I guess. But it's not bad, though, for just, walking along. You could also do a sit down, in a house, and use the back or front camera for the cinematic mode. It's just even if you're sitting down in your house recording a video, it's better to use the front-facing screen, the selfie screen, so you can see what's going on. If you use the back screen, it's higher quality, but you can't see anything. That's why I need high-quality sensors on both front and back of the camera for vloggers or YouTubers. I just don't think there's enough demand for it. Okay, now for conclusions. Okay, conclusions. Conclusions in the testing of the cinematic mode, iPhone 14 Plus versus Google Pixel 7. Well, I'm shooting this with the iPhone 14 Plus, so that probably gives you an idea of which way I'm kind of leaning. So anyways, first of all, you really have to buy these cameras and do all the testing yourself in order to get the best picture or the best idea, because there's so many variables. There's about 1 million variables, and with that many variables it makes it difficult to give a really comprehensive review. So that's the sucky part, is that there's so many variables that for each shooter you almost have to buy the cameras, so it gets expensive. So I just can't do all the tests. There's just so many tests that you have to do for each situation that you might be needing the feature for. But I think that cinematic mode is great for vloggers because it allows you to move with the camera, to document your life, and to separate yourself from your background a bit. Give yourself a bit of separation from all the chaos going on in the background as you're moving around your life. Legally, it can help to blur people's faces or maybe signage in the background with certain situations. But it allows you to just give you a bit of a cleaner image and focus attention on the vlogger instead of all the craziness in the background. But that's assuming you have good technique. You're holding the camera steady and if you're shaking the camera all over the place, well, you probably don't need cinematic mode, because there's so much chaos it really doesn't matter if there's some blur in the background. Right now I've got the camera up. I got the iPhone 14 Plus with the front-facing camera, selfie screen, so selfie camera, so I can see what's going on. So it's very helpful, and I'm trying to hold it steady to make it sort of easier for the audience to comprehend what the hell's going on. So anyways, the deal is this. iPhone 14 Plus has the better cinematic mode. And there's 4 things to keep in mind here with the cinematic mode business. And this is just a rough test. I'm going to refocus this thing to make sure it's in properly set. But the deal is this. Number one, you need a cell phone camera with cinematic mode, and you have to have a screen attached to the camera that you're using. In this case, it's the front-facing camera, but you need a screen so you can frame yourself, so you can check exposure, so you can check focus, and so you can check the blur amount to see what the blur is doing. Because sometimes, can you see what's going on there with my finger? It'll have holes in the blur, and you got to monitor it. You don't need to have it perfect, but it's software, so it's doing the comprehensive, calculations, and there's going to be issues. So just keep in mind that you need to monitor some stuff. So you need the screen. Number 2, static shots only, if possible. It's hard to do when you're vlogging, but if you got static shots, it's just less work for the software to do when it's trying to blur the background. And the less work it has to do, the easier it is for the software. So you're just going to get a higher quality result if you're not moving around. If you're moving around, there's going to be potentially holes in your blur, especially if you're walking. Don't let this stop you from walking, though, because it'll make the vlog more interesting if you're moving. Just keep in mind, you can have more problems the more moving. Number 3, you should try and be close. You should try and be as close to the camera as possible. In this case, I'm about 2-3 feet away. This makes it easier for the software to figure out what it's focusing on. Because if I was standing like about 6-10 feet away, then the software has trouble separating me from the background. Also, what you could add into there is no, that's probably good enough for number 3. Number 4, you should lock focus. Just lock focus on your subject, which is me. Like you're vlogging, usually, you're 2-3 feet away. Just lock focus on the screen. Hopefully it has that feature on whatever cell phone you're using. Because it just helps the software to decide what it's supposed to be focusing on. And that's your 4 main things that you should keep in mind when you're using the cinematic mode, which is a good idea. I like the whole idea. Now, the reasons why the iPhone is also better than the Pixel for this job is it's got better mics. I believe in not using external mics and wind muffs and all this stuff because it just creates friction, complication. With this camera here, this iPhone 14 Plus, I can drop it, I can kick it down the alley. While it's recording, pick it up and still keep shooting and all will be well. You can't do that with a dedicated camera. They're just too fragile. You got those flippy out screens, you drop them, you're gonna break them. Cell phones are closers. You should always be closing. Always be shooting, and you should let nothing get between you and getting the shot and getting it posted. Cell phones are perfect for that. Anyways, the iPhone mics are just better. The audio limiters are better in these mics, and they just handle wind better. If it gets windy, try not to shoot in the wind. If you are in the wind, just get closer. Get your message out there, and you'll be fine. But just try and eyeball the wind. You can eyeball the wind and know when it's too bad. The more you shoot with your cell phone, the more you're going to figure out, okay, this wind's too great. We're just going to move into a less windy situation. But that's one good thing. But the Google Pixel 7 could just tweak the software on those mics and it wouldn't be so sensitive if they wanted to. The other thing that we should talk about probably is, ideally, we shouldn't have software cinematic mode in a software sense. Like, this is a 1/1.7 sensor on the back camera of this iPhone Plus, which is barely big enough to create some background bokeh at 2-3 feet in a vlogging situation. But a 1/1.3, which is on the Google Pixel 7, that actually can create some background bokeh, which is not bad. So if you put a 1/1.3 sensor on the front and on the back, with a screen on the front, all you need is one screen, 2 sensors the same size, you'd be fine. You'd have a nice image for shooting away from you and one from shooting towards you. And you could have, some nice blur. Maybe you can get a 1-inch sensor, why not? Forget about the telephoto camera, forget about the ultrawide camera, just get two mains. One in the front, one in the back, a screen on the front. And you can see yourself, you could see the blur, and it would have a nice separation. You wouldn't need all this software baloney. I don't think that's ever going to happen, though. I think it's the demographic. I don't think there's enough vloggers out there to warrant creating such a product. My hand is shaking, it's so cold. So that might show up. What can you do? This is the way it is, though. Vlogging outside. It's like -5, -10. I don't know. It's cold. Maybe I'll use 2 hands and I won't shake so much. But it's authentic. That's what you need. Outside, freezing to death, vlogging. This is real life. Like, anyone can vlog indoors in a nice, comfy house. How authentic is that, though? It's not authentic. So anyways, here's our other options for vlogging with a little bit of separation in the background. Ideally, what we'd like is a couple of large sensors packed into one camera. since we don't have that, Samsung, I haven't tested the Samsung phones. You got your iPhones, you got your Google Pixels, and you got your Samsungs. That's the major 3 camera manufacturers in North America, or in Canada anyways. I hear the Samsungs have some good cinematic modes on their selfie cameras. I haven't tested them, but I should, because you can control the mics too in the stock app on the Samsung phones, which is really good. That's really attractive. See, I gotta buy more phones. You just gotta test, buy more phones. The form factor on the phone is so good. That's where I need to invest my money, because it's just gonna, that's where I'm gonna close. I'm gonna close with a cell phone, so it might be worth it to invest in that. I had a Samsung S9 once. It was okay. I should go back into them now. Anyways, Samsungs, like the S22 series, might have a good selfie mode on the front-facing camera with the screen. Also, Samsung has the Flip 4 and the Fold 4. Flip 4 has a small screen on the front, on the back camera. Small screen on the back camera, and it's got a 1/1.7 sensor, which is barely big enough to create some bokeh, because you can create some bokeh with this camera. It's got a 1/1.7 as well. But the screen on that back camera on the Samsung Flip 4 is really tiny. So tiny that it's just too tiny. But coming this summer is the Flip 5. Flip 5 is supposed to have a much bigger screen on the back camera. The back camera will probably be at least 1.7 or 1/1.7. So that 2023, summer of 2023, the Samsung Flip 5 could be quite interesting for vloggers, to get you some separation between you and your background while you're doing this without needing software. The Samsung Flip 4 Fold has, I think, it's a 1/1.5 sensor on the back, which is better. Definitely get some separation there. But in order to use it, you have to fold out the camera completely to use that screen. So then it's huge and it's folded out, awkward to hold. If you drop it in that configuration, it could be bad. It's also very expensive. So the Samsung Fold 4 it's doable, but it's not ideal because it's so big. The Flip 4 design is better, and the Flip 5 should be quite interesting to watch. Other than that, you have things like the Sony ZV-1F, which has a big sensor, 1 inch, but it's a dedicated camera. It's got the flippy screen. So, sure, you've got some separation, but you drop that camera, you'll bust it. I still say the form factor for the cell phone is the best form factor. So durable, so simple, so inconspicuous. You can drop it. You can get it wet. You can surf the net. You can upload. You can edit on it. You can do so much. The form factor is amazing. I don't know why Sony doesn't. Sony makes cell phone cameras too. You'd think they have the Xperia line. Why don't they just take the Xperia 1 or the Xperia 5, put 2 big sensors on it with 1 screen? But they won't. I don't know why. Oh well. Instead, they made the Sony ZV-1F, which seems odd. So that's about all I can tell you about cinematic mode. It's a good idea, especially for vloggers. Right now, iPhones have the best cinematic mode for the selfie screen, but Samsung S22s might have a good cinematic mode. I don't know. But the Google Pixel 7, not so good, because cinematic mode is only on the back camera, and the back camera does not have a screen, so we have to wait until the Pixel 8. Maybe it will have cinematic mode on the selfie camera, the front camera and the back camera. Okay. This was a very long and cold video. Cool alley though.